Hey, it's Tim here, coach of Men Who Want More, and I'm on a mission to help and serve and inspire 1 million men. 1 million men to step up into their strength and find high levels of clarity, courage, and to feel a real sense of progress. Because I've been through a lot in my life and I feel it's time to give back to the men out there. I know so many of you feel like that you're not enough, that life's just tough and you're not getting the results that you want in your life, whether it's in your marriage and relationships, in your business and finances, or within your body. I believe it's every man's obligation and responsibility to become stronger emotionally, mentally, and physically. And I'm here to serve that and pass on some lessons. And today's message I want to share with you is Tony Robbins' 2 best tips to live an extraordinary quality of life. And why I'm sharing this with you, because I've just come off the back of 2 days working on myself at a conference, an event that was incredible. It was the National Achievers Congress here in Sydney, Australia. And it's an event where a bunch of speakers come together, one of those multi-speaker events, and they give you some value and obviously, sell you off the back of that into their program or whatever product or service they've got to offer. Which I'm all for, because I'm all for growing and feeding your mind. And I've been a big fan of personal development events my whole life. And I look to get to one every single year at least, to expand myself, to grow myself, to progress myself, and therefore so I can contribute and pass that on. And if you're watching this message, I want to share with you Tony Robbins' 2 best tips to create an extraordinary quality of life. And if you're just new to personal development, or maybe you've been in the game for a fair while and you just haven't come across Tony's work, I just wanted to quickly share who is Tony Robbins. He's an entrepreneur, best-selling author, philanthropist, and the world's #1 life and business strategist. No one understands the psychology of success like Tony Robbins. I truly believe that. Tony has coached more than 50 million people from over 100 countries to reach their greatest potential. He's authored 5 international best-selling books, including the recent New York Times #1 best-selling book, Unshakable, and he's created the #1 personal and professional development program of all time, and more than 4 million people have attended his live seminars. I'm one of those 4 million people, and I've dived deep into Tony's work over the last few years. And I remember way back to 2010 when I first saw Tony. And it was at one of these events where there was a lot of speakers. And everyone came in and did their thing and was great. But then Tony usually ends those events. And his style, if you've never seen him live, is incredible. The energy that he brings, the enthusiasm that he brings is second to none. That's why he's the best in the world, in my opinion, at presenting from stage. And he just blew the roof off the arena that I was in. And it was incredible. And from that day forth, I thought, I want what he's got. So I attended some of his programs, started diving deep into his work, and a few years later I sit here, and a lot of his methodologies I use within myself and within the clients and men that I coach, because it works, and he's the best in the world. So if it's good enough for him, it's definitely good enough for me. And I remember sitting in that audience many years ago, and I looked up at him, and obviously his words are incredible, and his inspiration and energy and everything that goes with it. And he became very vulnerable, and that was a part of me that I disowned. And he was talking about his beautiful wife, Sage. And I remember looking up at him and go, I want that. But I knew that at that point in that time, that every man in the room wanted to be Tony, and every woman in the room wanted to be with Tony. And it was at that point I said, hey, I need to start living more into my truth as a man, more into my strength. And I started that journey. So I started researching, studying, coaching, everything I could get my hands on, books, audios, videos. I got coaches, and I started modeling. And I'm grateful that some of that caught traction. And I sit here now being able to do what I do, which is coach men to step into their strength and help people from all walks of life upgrade their quality of life. And if it wasn't for Tony's work, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I wanted to share with you his 2 tips. I've got some notes here because I was scribbling away yesterday evening. And the first thing that I wanted to relay to you, if you're watching, and the first tip that Tony gave that really stood out for me, and I've heard this, and he brought this up at one of his TED Talks about a decade ago. And let me ask you a question. What's been holding you back? Hey, Nay, thanks for joining. What's been holding you back in your life? Think of an area of your life whether it's your health, your relationships, your money, your business or career, your spirituality, whichever area that you pick, what's been holding you back? And just spend a few seconds now thinking about that. And my guess is that it's either time, money, people that you've chosen, or a version of that. And what Tony speaks into is those are resources. Time, money, people. They're all resources. Yet he challenges you, and I challenge you here, to think of it differently. Rather than think of it's the time or the money or the people, the resources out there that are holding you back. What happens if your belief was, it's not the resources, but my resourcefulness? It's not the resources, but my resourcefulness. That's the take home here. It's never a matter of resources. If you want it enough, can't you always find the money? If you really want it enough, can't you always find the time? And if you really want enough, can't you always find the people to help you? And the answer is, of course, yes. And I know you know this, but this is a great reminder for me. And I've heard this. It's not the lack of resources, but a lack of resourcefulness, which holds us back to a higher quality of life. And I know you men out there who are watching, I'm talking to you directly. Resourcefulness will increase your level of progress and freedom that you feel within yourself. Resourcefulness, not resources. It's not her fault. It's not the economy's fault. It's not that your boss's fault. It's your responsibility and obligation as a strong, courageous man out there to understand that it's your resourcefulness. That you need to step more into your strength and find more resourcefulness within so the resources become available to you. Does that make sense? Because that was Tony's first tip on creating an extraordinary quality of life, is it's not the resources, it's resourcefulness. His second, and this was huge, this one, is we identify so heavily with our mind, with our thoughts, and we start to feel different feelings when we have different thoughts. So thought comes into our head, and that thought might be of frustration. And then we think it's our mind. And what he spoke about last night of his event was, it's not your mind, it's the mind. And what I mean by that is, do you know anybody who's had similar thoughts to you, such as they're worried about lack of finances, or they're worried about their partner, their wife or their husband or their spouse, or they're worried about their health or somebody's health that they love? Have you ever had those thoughts? I've had plenty of those thoughts. You see, those thoughts and every thought that you've had is a universal thought. It's a thought that's been in the universe for thousands of years. So it's not your thought. It's the mind's. Now you access that thought, you identify with it, and then you feel like shit from it. So what Tony talks about is, rather than go into suffering or fear-based states of being, based on your thoughts, based on those universal thoughts that you think are yours, but they're not, they're the universe's, choose a different way. And that different way is choose to live in a beautiful state. Now he mentions this word beautiful state purposefully, because you don't need to suffer, and you can choose to live in a beautiful state anytime you like. Now again, I've heard this before, but it really sunk in last night when I saw Tony talking more and more into this. And this was a shift that he's made in the last 5 years within himself. Now he's Tony Robbins, the number one business and life strategist in the world, and he's still learning. And he's been doing this for 30 to 40 years. So I took note and thought, what happens if I chose to live in a beautiful state? Not sometimes, all the time. And when those suffering states, now identify what your suffering states are. Suffering states are such as, I'll give you mine. My three that I identified, that I move into more often than not, are overwhelm, frustration, and annoyance. Overwhelm, frustration, and annoyance. They were mine. That's the flavour of what suffering looks like to me as an individual. Tony mentioned that his was stress and pissed off. What are yours? Are yours overwhelm, frustration, annoyance, stressed, pissed off, agitation, worry, doubt, whatever they are. Now, we all have those fearful states or those suffering states. The question is, will you choose to live there? Will you be unconscious and choose to live there? Or will you choose to move through those suffering states, up-level your consciousness and your way of thinking, and all of a sudden start to live in more of a beautiful state or a love-based state? What are those states? Well, those states are being maybe more happiness, joyful, courage, excitement, gratitude. They're more beautiful states. Let me just move this sun. Can't move the sun. I mean, move this phone. No, wrong way. This way. So choose to live in a beautiful state. That is what Tony was talking about. That will absolutely... Hey, Dico, how you going, mate? That will absolutely change the way that you view your world, is if you choose to live in a beautiful state as opposed to buying in unconsciously to the suffering states. And this is what I've written. Happiness, his happiness was cheap, and maybe yours is too. And I looked at it and go, shit, my happiness is cheap a lot of the time. I let the externals dictate how I feel, rather than owning a beautiful state, an empowered state, a state of inspiration. And no matter what the fuck goes on out there, I'm in control of that. No matter what triggers me, whether it's a person, whether it's a situation, whether it's an event, that I can own a beautiful state. I can own that, and so can you. So that was his second tip, or the second tip that I'm sharing today on how to live an extraordinary quality of life, is own your emotional states. Bring better energy to you, and all of a sudden the externals, they don't matter as much because you're choosing how you live. The beautiful states versus suffering states. And when you can start to live in a beautiful state and bring that consciousness there, then life just gets better. I know, think about it, your experience of life are the emotional states that you live in. Doesn't matter how much money you got in the bank account, that you got that beautiful wife or partner, that you've got a great body and great health. If your emotional home is pissed off, stressed, overwhelmed, agitated, annoyed, frustrated, that's the quality of your life. And unless you take ownership over that, and I take ownership over that, and we shift our way of thinking and our consciousness and our way of being into more of a beautiful state, we will always be the victim of those disempowering states. So I'm going to leave you with, how do you actually do that? I'll give you a couple of little tips on how do you transform, and what Tony mentioned, how do you transform into that beautiful state? The first thing is you've got to recognize it. You've got to know what your flavor of suffering states are. Again, mine was overwhelm, frustration, and annoyance. Tony's, his was pissed off and stressed. What are yours? That's the first thing. Write those down. What are your suffering states that you move into? Second part of it is, once you start feeling those states of being starting to rise, because they will, maybe not all day, but some of the day, maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. When you start to feel those suffering states come up, here's what you need to do. You need to change your physiology. We need to breathe. So there's many ways to change your physiology, but one way is to breathe deep. Because what happens when you start feeling suffering? When you're feeling stressed, what happens? Does your breath quicken, or does it be slower? Of course, it gets quicker. So you want to shift that pattern. How you shift that pattern? You bring consciousness to it. You start breathing slow and deep. So when you feel, so say for me, when I start feeling a bit frustrated, I need to own that. I need to go, I'm feeling frustrated here. Here's this suffering state. And then what I need to do is I need to breathe deep and slow. Start breathing deeper and slower. That's automatically going to change your biochemistry and start to shift that emotion and move you more into a beautiful state. The second thing you want to do after you've started to change your physiology through some breath is, quite simply, is close your eyes if you're in a place to do that and start to focus on the appreciation. And how can you do that? The question that you want to ask yourself in that moment is, what do I need to learn here? Very simple. What do I need to learn here? So you're getting pissed off. You start feeling that pissed off coming, that stress coming into your world. Somebody hasn't done something the right way. You had an expectation that didn't get met. Whatever it is, that starts to bubble up, is breathe deep and slow. The second thing is, you need to find the appreciation. What do I need to learn here? What can I appreciate right now in this moment? Because there's always, like Tony says, what's wrong is always available. So is what's right. What's wrong is always available. So is what's right. And as a strong man out there, you can choose. We've got that decision-making process to choose what's right. And what's right is not to allow suffering states to hijack your happiness, but instead move into beautiful states. Breathe, own the state, breathe, and then shift into appreciation. Straight away, that's going to bring that suffering state down a few notches, and you're going to be able to move into that beautiful state. Now, from a beautiful state, do you make better decisions or worse decisions? Of course you make better decisions. Do you find more resourcefulness? Of course you find more resourcefulness. Tip number 1. So if you can own and make a commitment to yourself that from now on, you're going to move through suffering states and you're going to commit to living in a more beautiful state, your quality of life will become more and more extraordinary day by day. So they're the 2 tips from Tony that I learned at the recent event that I attended. If you haven't seen Tony Robbins live, find a way. Get resourceful and resourcefulness. Get resourceful and find a way to go and see him live, because it's like nothing you'll ever experience. You come out of that event and you'll be not only pumped up, but you'll be inspired. You'll be inspired to become a better man, a better person, a better dad, a better spouse, a better man. And I encourage you to do that. If this has served you, this message has served you, please share it, please like it. I really appreciate your support. Hey Maritesh. And if you want to find out more about what's happening in my world and how I can support and serve you, step into your strength more and more, find high levels of confidence, clarity, courage, and feel a real sense of progress, because I know at times as men we don't give ourselves that gift, PM me, I'm always here to help. And I look forward to chatting to you shortly. And that's it from me. So wherever you're watching in the world, thanks so much again. Have an incredible day, and bye for now.